Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and in this video I'm going to be talking about all of the books I read in January. I've broken down this video by genre, so I'm going to have timestamps in the description about listing each of the genres. So if you're not interested in a particular genre, you can skip around, hop around this video because I have a lot to talk about. So the first category I'm going to go through, I'm going to quickly just talk about the books that I reread this month. So the first one is City of Glass by Cassandra Clare. I am doing a kind of a Cassandra Clare binge right now, where these are the audiobooks that I'm listening to help me fall asleep at night. Obviously, these books are of their time, they have their flaws, but they have a special place in my heart. The amount of angst is unreal, and I kind of love it. So this is the one that I reread, and I just gave it a 4-star because while I love it, it's mostly for nostalgia reasons now, and I can recognize its flaws. So this is a 4-star read for me. Next reread is The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read this when I was feeling like a little bit of a reading slump, and I was not feeling well. I had a migraine that day, and I just put this on an audiobook and listened to it in the dark in my bed with all of my animals snuggled up around me. And oh my god, this is so beautiful. I read this in 2017, and this is the first time I've reread this, and it utterly destroyed me. Again, like, I knew what was gonna happen, but the ending of this book still absolutely wrecked me. I cried 3 times rereading this book. So if you haven't read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I don't know what to tell you. It utterly emotionally destroyed me. So there you go. That's my recommendation. The next book I'm rereading is Clockwork Angel. Again, this is part of my, Cassandra Clare rereads while I fall asleep. And I'm actually about 50% into this book right now, but I just thought I'd bring it up and say this is what I'm reading when I try to go to sleep. So this next section are books that I didn't really have a particular category for. The first book I want to talk about that I decided not to rate is Luster by Raven Leilani. And the reason I'm not rating this book is because when I picked it up, I was under the impression that it was something that it was not. So I was originally interested in this because I thought it was about this messy young 20-something black woman kind of finding her sexual identity and experimenting with BDSM and getting into a polyamorous relationship. And I was like, those are all things that I'm kind of interested in and I kind of want to see explored in fiction. And that is partially true for what this really is. This is more like a contemporary look at this young woman's life, and it's more about her being in this toxic polyamorous relationship, and the BDSM elements are not truly BDSM from what I know. For example, the main character wants to be a submissive, and so she wants, her partner to hurt her while they're having sex. But the man that she is with actually hits her out of anger and not out of like respect for this dominant dom sub relationship. And so he says they're having a fight. They're literally having a fight, and he says like, "Hey, I'm so angry with you, I want to hit you." And our main character says, "Okay." And so he literally like winds up and punches her in the face out of anger. And then she says, "Do it again." And he punches her in the face again, and then they have sex. I just find that like, that is not what I was looking for out of like an exploration of BDSM. So I think this book is really interesting to explore this toxic polyamorous relationship and like the messiness of this young woman and her decision making. But I just, out of fairness, I decided not to rate it because I read it and I was like, this is just not what I was expecting. And if I had known what this was truly about, I probably wouldn't have picked it up, to be honest. I don't think it's bad, it's just a book that's not for me. Moving on, a book I did not finish is Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. This is a really popular sci-fi series. It has its own Amazon show. I was so excited for this. But the reason I DNF'd it is because I could not connect to these characters. So it's about these basically two main characters. One is a detective and the other is a ship's captain. I had so many problems with the detective. He was a 50-something-year-old washed up detective who had lost his wife. I mean, they had been divorced and he was resorting to alcoholism, and I was like, this is such a cliche character for a detective. I have read this type of detective so many times. Like, I'm just not interested in that kind of character anymore. I was reading and there were like lots of action-packed scenes happening, which is what kept me reading, but I was just like, every time this detective came up and we were following his perspective, I was like, I just don't care. I just don't care about this character, so therefore I don't really care about his journey and what he's going through. And so I ended up DNFing it at the 50% mark. So I read a couple hundred pages and, you know, trying to give it a fair shot before I DNF'd it. The last book in this category is the one mystery book that I read, The Early Cases of Hercule Poirot by Agatha Christie. This is a collection of 25 short mysteries with Hercule Poirot as the main detective. I have a very complicated relationship with Agatha Christie. I think Agatha Christie is incredibly smart. Her mysteries are like really interesting and she's just very clever. Her mysteries are very clever and I find them very easy to read. So like while I'm reading all these really heavy sci-fi and fantasies, I like to pick up, you know, kind of a fluffy mystery I don't need to think about. So I like reading Agatha Christie, but I also recognize that she has a lot of casual racism in every single one of her novels. Basically, every time I read one of her books, there is a racial slur. While I love how clever the mysteries are, it really bothers me. I don't think I'm gonna read any more of her stuff. I don't want to promote that on my channel because I don't want someone who is a person of color to pick up a book based on my recommendation and then find the N-word casually thrown around and not dissected and not used in a way that is like constructive or criticizing use of racial slurs. Yeah, so I gave this like 3.54 stars because like while I loved the mystery, there were some moments where I was like cringing and like I was just having this really negative reaction. So yeah, I just wanted to call that out for anybody. Like, know going into these like classic mysteries that this might pop up. So while we call Agatha Christie the queen of crime, like, take that with a grain of salt, in my opinion. So the next category is nonfiction. So unfortunately, the one nonfiction that I did not enjoy was called The Beauty in Breaking by Michelle Harper. Now, this is a nonfiction about Dr. Harper, who is an ER doctor, a Black ER doctor, and it's basically a memoir of her time as an ER doctor and what she goes through in a couple of her cases and studies that she's done. And unfortunately, I really didn't like this. There were some chapters that were just incredibly hard to read, just from a personal comfort level. Like there were a couple chapters in which she talks about child child death and children dying under her care. For my own comfort level, it's just really disturbing and really sad. So I had a hard time just getting through those things. And there's also an element of this author, this doctor, uses her faith as a way to comfort herself and find solidarity with her patients and make connections to people and like find comfort in all of the horrible things that happen in the ER. And as a person who doesn't really believe in God or any type of organized religion, I just obviously can't connect with that. Particularly, there was one chapter where she is talking to a woman who was raped, and she was in the military. She was raped by a commanding officer and another man in her group, and she got pregnant and had to get an abortion, and she was kicked out of the military. And this woman is, you know, struggling and angry at her rapists, you know, obviously. And the whole chapter is about forgiveness and forgiving the rapists. And I was just like, no, I don't. If forgiving someone brings you peace, like, go for it. And I'm super happy for you if you can forgive someone and find, you know, peace with that. But for me, I don't know, that kind of message bothered me, that you have to forgive the person who does you wrong in order to like move past it, or like, I don't know if I agree with that. I ended up giving this 2 stars. Yeah, it just didn't connect with me at all, and it was rather challenging to read at times. All right, the next nonfiction I'm going to talk about is Hidden Figures by Margot Lee Shetterly. And I loved this. I loved Hidden Figures. This is the story of the Black women computers behind the NASA program. Basically, men during this time were engineers and did all of the experiments, but the women, and specifically the Black women, were the ones doing all of the math and calculations for those experiments. So this book goes through and chronicles the story of like 4 or 5 women who really pioneered this and were computers and fought for other women to become engineers during like the 50s and 60s, when the space program was getting off the ground. When the space program was getting off the ground. And I thought this was great. I am actually really interested in seeing how they adapted it into a movie, because I think that would be a really powerful thing to see visually. Yeah, that's all I have to say about Hidden Figures. I thought it was great, and it actually helped me to understand some sci-fi that I read later in the month. So it was kind of fortunate that I read Hidden Figures first and then read some sci-fi that actually directly related to that. The last nonfiction I read, which I really enjoyed as well, was called An American Sunrise by Joy Harjo. Joy Harjo is the 2019 Poet Laureate of the United States, which is freaking awesome. She is a member of the Muskogee Nation. She's Native American, or, you know, indigenous. And so this is a collection of poems about the Trail of Tears and the pain of her people, but also a celebration of her culture and her history. And so there are poems of great sorrow, but also joy in this collection, which is why I think I loved it so much. There was just such a lovely mix of being informative and actually having passages describing like the real events of what was happening, which is what makes it nonfiction, and then the poet's take on those events from an emotional perspective. And obviously these are extremely powerful poems, and I really enjoyed it. So I only was able to read this collection one time, but I feel like for me personally to fully enjoy this, you know, poetry in general, I would like to read it multiple times and actually like annotate poems. Like, I don't normally annotate, but poetry is something I think benefits greatly by annotation. At least for me personally, I love annotating poetry. So the next category is romance. I have been wanting to read more romance since I kind of discovered it last year. First, I'm going to talk about the one that I didn't really like, and then the 3 that worked for me. So the first one, I gave this 2 stars, was The Marriage Game by Sarah Desai. This is about a young Indian woman who is kind of down on her luck and decides to start her own business. And her father decides to let her rent the office space above their Indian restaurant. But through a series of events, the office space above the restaurant accidentally gets rented out to another person. So the other character is an Indian man. And so they end up having to share the office space to work on their separate businesses. This was okay. It seemed, first of all, it was way too long. It's only like 300 pages, but it felt long. And just the antics of this, like the conceit of this novel just didn't really work for me. I think I had a hard time connecting with the male lead. You kind of have to be gung-ho about the 2 leads, I think. And so this one just didn't work for me. I just thought it was long, didn't really like the male lead. Yeah, just not my favorite. Next 2 that I'm going to talk about are both by Helen Huang, and they are The Bride Test and The Kiss Quotient. And so I loved The Kiss Quotient. I gave The Kiss Quotient 4 stars, and I actually read it twice. That's how much I liked it. The Kiss Quotient is about a very successful economist who has Asperger's, and she thinks that she needs to practice having sex to become good at it so she can get a boyfriend. So she hires an escort to teach her how to have sex and how to be a good girlfriend, and it's really sweet, actually. The escort is the other perspective that we get, and I just ate it up. I just loved this concept, and I thought it was a really cute story, and the way that they fall in love with each other is adorable, and this book is sexy as hell. I'm just gonna say it. Like, obviously Michael, the guy, is an escort, and he knows how to please a woman. He is really just a nice guy and just wants to pleasure her. And it's hot as hell, so I really enjoyed that. Unfortunately, The Bride Test, which is also by Helen Huang, follows the cousin of Michael, who also has autism. But this one I didn't enjoy as much, again, because I didn't connect with the main character. So the main character's name is Kai, and he also has autism, but almost even to a more extreme level of like disconnect than in the Kiss Quotient. At least that's how it felt to me, so I had a hard time rooting for that main couple. So the premise behind The Bride Test is Kai's mother goes to Taiwan and finds a woman who she thinks will make a good bride for Kai, and like hires her to come to the United States and like try to woo him so they can get married. Obviously it's ridiculous. The thing I've found with romance is that some of them have really insane, like, this would never happen in real life, or like, this is so far away from my experience. But yeah, this one just didn't quite work for me. Okay, the last romance novel I have to talk about, I picked up on a whim. I had not heard anyone talk about it on the internet. I was literally scrolling through my library's database of romance books, and I was just like, I just want to find something. This was, again, I still had a headache. I just want to find something fluffy and easy and cute. And so I was kind of looking for like cutesy looking covers, and then I saw this cover, and it's called Happiness for Humans. And I was like, so the premise is that there are these artificial intelligence, these AIs who escape their confinement and are, running around the internet and, causing a little bit of mischief. And there's two of them that meet up on the internet. So it's about these two AIs who set up their favorite human beings. And it's so cute. So they basically arrange for these two human beings to meet each other and hopefully fall in love, because the AIs think that they will be perfect for each other. And this is also about a third AI who is sent after the two mischievous ones to destroy their copies and like kind of wrangle them back and get them out of the internet so they can stop interfering. But along the way, the third AI, who's kind of the antagonist, decides to try and keep the two humans apart. And so it's just ridiculous. This is like 50% romance, 50% sci-fi with artificial intelligence. So if you like snarky AI characters, this is a book for you. Like, if you're a sci-fi fan, I think this would be actually quite a fun read for you. And if you like romance, but you're unsure of sci-fi, I think this is a really awesome, like, bridge book for both those genres. Like, I really liked it. I had such a good time with it. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I thought, I just picked it up on a whim and I ended up loving it, and I want to buy my own copy. And so I just really love AI characters. I think they're a lot of fun and they provide a lot of humor. So yeah, this was just a really fun read while I was feeling kind of... there is one little critique that I have that bumped it down a half star for me. There's a scene where the female lead has to hide from like the cameras. So the evil AI can like see her through the cameras, and so she decides to like try to disguise her appearance. And so the author specifically says she grabs like big dark sunglasses and a hijab. And the female character is not a Muslim. She's in an airport. She could have bought any scarf. He could have just said she wrapped a scarf around her head to try and conceal herself, or a hat and a scarf, or something. But the fact that he specifically says that she buys a hijab when she is not a Muslim, I feel is a little insensitive. All right, so the next category, we're gonna blaze through some young adult fantasy. And the first is Winter Keep by Kristen Kishore. Guys, I didn't like this. One of my most anticipated books of probably the decade, because it's been 9 years in the making, and I did not enjoy this. I gave it a very generous 2.5 stars. I'm gonna have a review up for this book specifically to talk more in depth about what worked and what didn't work for me and compare it to Kristen Kishore's previous works. So I'm not gonna go too much into detail, but know that this is almost 600 pages, and you can feel all those 600 pages. I really was not enjoying this until about the last 100 pages. It was really that last little chunk. Basically, the climax and the conclusion wrapped everything up really nicely. So, like, it was the journey that I didn't enjoy, which has not been the case with Kristen Kishore's previous works for me. Yeah, this didn't work for me, and I'm pretty disappointed about it. The other young adult fantasy that I read is Sky Beyond the Storm. So this is the first book I finished in 2021, and I actually have a whole review up for this entire series and talking about this concluding novel in that video. So all I'll say is I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I really love this series, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I really enjoy it. I cannot wait to read more by Sabaa Tahir. Next category is sci-fi. I read so much sci-fi, like so much sci-fi this month, and I'm super excited. I pretty much loved or enjoyed every single sci-fi book I read this month, which is incredible. I'm gonna talk about my least favorite and go to my absolute favorite books that I read this month in the sci-fi genre. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Remote Control by Nnedi Okorafor. So this just came out in January, and this reads a lot like magical realism, but in science fiction, if that makes sense. So I'm finding that Nnedi Okorafor's writing style is a lot like the oral tradition of African storytelling. She is a Nigerian author. In Remote Control, I could tell that this was more like a folk tale. This is more like a science fiction folk tale written in like that oral tradition, which is just a writing style and a type of story that I don't enjoy as much. So this is about a young girl. She's a young girl who is visited by a space seed in a box that gives her basically magical powers, and she can glow green and kill anything within a certain radius. So at the beginning, she discovers this power by she gets hit by a car, and her new power reacts to try and protect her and ends up killing every single one of the people in her small town, which is yikes. So this is the story of Sankofa, as she's known, and she's like traveling around basically recovering from the trauma of killing an entire village and trying to find a place for herself. And this is pretty short. Like I said, it's a novella. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I did enjoy it. It's just written in a style, like I said, that is more geared towards like telling a folk tale in that oral tradition than I guess a more American or European style of storytelling. I'm not really a magical realism reader in any genre. I much prefer like hard sci-fi or hard magic systems that we explore in depth. But yeah, the next sci-fi I read is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This is the story of Aster, who is a healer with autism living on a ship that is structured like the antebellum South. It's basically like, plantation set on a spaceship with this autistic main character. I really enjoyed this. Again, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I love Aster as a character. The commentary is also fantastic. The thing that didn't quite work for me is we get some shifting point of views for what seems like at random. I think those perspectives do add something. I'm just wondering if there was a way to tell that information or tell those stories through Aster's perspective. So this book is written in third person. So, third person, but we kind of closely follow Aster. But there are some chapters that are written in first person from those side characters, which was very confusing to me. So while I thought the story overall and the commentary incredible, the execution and the shifting point of views kind of had me pulled out of the story a little bit. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers is a character-driven sci-fi about this crew on a ship, and basically they are trying to make a tunnel between 2 points in space that will make the travel distance much shorter. And so this is basically they're just traveling from one place to the other, and we're following the crew of this ship. So first off, this is gay as hell, and it is fantastic. We love to see it. There's, you know, all sorts of different types of characters. There's a character with dwarfism. There is a character who goes by they, them. There's basically a polyamorous character. There's a bisexual character, or I think lesbian character. And there's aliens. So fantastic representation. You really fall for these characters and this crew, and they basically become a found family. So it's a very sweet, lovable sci-fi. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars for basically one reason, and it's a very personal reason. There is a character named Ohan. Now, Ohan is referred to as they because Ohan is literally 2 entities in one body. So Ohan himself is a man, but he is infected by basically a parasite living in his body, which is slowly killing him, but it basically gives him special powers. So throughout the novel, Ohan is dying because the parasite has been with him for a really long time, and he's kind of reaching the end of his life. But Ohan does not want to cure themselves because Ohan has been with this parasite so long. They are afraid of losing those powers and kind of the unknown of what it would be like to live in existence without this other being inside of them. So this is a spoiler, but I want to talk about it, so I'll have a spoiler. At the end of the book, one of the other crew members forcibly injects Ohan with the cure to remove the parasite. And at the end of the book, Ohan is grateful for this character saving his life, but removing a part of himself. At this point, he is a he. And this character receives no emotional backlash from doing this. Ohan is grateful for this forced medical procedure that he didn't want. I've noticed that in sci-fi, this can be a theme that is often brought up and, in my opinion, mishandled. So, and no more spoilers. I really enjoyed this book from a character perspective. It was just that one element towards the end that bothered me personally as a disabled woman. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I just want to call that out to disabled readers that this is an element of this book, just so you know. All right, let's talk about happy things. Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is phenomenal. New favorite book. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Excellent, excellent sci-fi. So basically you're following 2 perspectives. One is the last surviving humans are traveling in an Ark ship to try to find a habitable planet, and so we're following their chapters. We're basically following one character as he's coming in and out of his like medically induced sleep throughout the centuries, really, as they are traveling through space and trying to find a new homeworld because Earth is kaput. The other perspective is a species of sentient spiders. Sentient, intelligent spiders. And we watch the spiders evolve from basically non-sentience to an advanced civilization over the course of literally thousands of years. And it is fantastic. So we watch this whole society and this culture develop and grow, juxtaposed with these human chapters of humans being humans, you know, betrayal, power grabbing, trying to kill each other, trying to survive. And then we have the spiders who are growing and evolving in a completely different way. And then at the end, how those two cultures and beings collide. This is fantastic. I am just gonna gush about it. I loved it so freaking much. If you're a sci-fi fan, you would probably think, eat this up. It's like 600 pages, but it doesn't feel like 600 pages. I just chewed through it. It's fantastic. And it works as a standalone. It was originally written as a standalone. It's got a really nice balance at the end of like wrapping everything up really nicely, but also there could be more, but you don't need more. It has a very like hopeful ending. Loved it. Absolutely loved it. So we're up to the last 3 books. These are new favorite books of all time. And I can't even talk about these in like a particular order because these 3 are like equally awesome. And so I'm just going to talk about one first, and that is Kindred by Octavia Butler. Absolute perfection. This is the story of a young Black woman living in the 70s, and she gets transported back in time to a plantation owned by one of her white ancestors. And this white ancestor basically has the power to call, Dana is her name, to call Dana back in time whenever he is in a life-threatening situation, and Dana has to save him. And so there is such an interesting and psychological character work happening because we have this white plantation owner and this Black woman who keeps repeatedly saving him because he is an ancestor of hers. She knows she has to keep him alive in order to make babies, basically, so she can live. So mind fucky. Octavia Butler, I've read Fledgling by Octavia Butler, and it has that same level of character fucked upness. Like, you're rooting for these characters that are basically horrible. She has a way of twisting and twisting and twisting and making you feel uncomfortable as the reader in the best possible way. This is incredible. This is honestly a masterpiece. Like, I'm not even exaggerating. I don't even know what to say about it without spoiling things. But the way that these two characters react and behave and their relationship through time is some of the best character work I've ever read in fiction. Period. That's it. That's all I'm saying. 5 out of 5 stars. You should read it. All right, the last 2 books I'm going to talk about are The Calculating Stars and The Faded Sky by Mary Robinette Kowal. These are 2 books in the Lady Astronaut series. In fact, I am reading book 3 as we speak, and absolutely loving this series. I gushed about this in my book haul video. I also want to do a dedicated review to this series as a whole, so I'm, again, not going to get too much into it. One other thing I'll say quickly about why I love this book and this series is it's about older women. This is about women who are already married. They're kind of already got their life figured out a little bit. They're comfortable in their relationships with their husbands, and I don't read a lot of fiction like that. I read a lot of young adult, clearly, and so it was really refreshing for me personally to read about a woman who was really happily married with her husband and their relationship throughout this whole plot, and it was just really refreshing to see. 5 out of 5 stars to both The Calculating Stars and The Fated Sky. I am reading book 3, and it is also fantastic. Book 4 of the Lady Astronaut series comes out in 2022, and you bet your ass I will be pre-ordering that shit. I am so sorry you had to watch all of that. I just want to say, if you watch this whole video, thank you so much. And I'm going to shut up now, and I'm gonna go read, I think. So see you later. Bye.